Pleasant greetings, y'all. Proud Filipina Sharms Espina here, pondering on the two letters that is definitely the future happening now, AI. And oh yes, I am a hoops fan who followed Allen Iverson when he made his legendary mark on the hard court in the first decade of the millennium. But this AI is more than just a killer crossover and scoring machine, but rather a sweeping answer on how to build mechanized tools that'll do the work and solve our problems a whole lot faster and more efficiently. But it has a frightening downside, which experts and programmers who've worked and developed it warn us to tread lightly and carefully as this inside story deep dives into the risks and rewards of AI.
This week on The Inside Story, it's popping up everywhere and by design has a mind of its own. From political deep fakes to cheating in school and even creating art. Artificial intelligence is here to stay, but what does it mean for the humans who work with it? Now, on The Inside Story, AI, risks and rewards.
Hello, I'm Tina Trin in New York. This week we're delving into artificial intelligence, the ability of machines to emulate human intelligence in carrying out tasks and problem solving. It's a mainstay of our digital lives, programmed into everything from the search engines we consult to the self-driving cars navigating the streets. The latest developments in AI center on generative artificial intelligence, which builds on the automated systems of earlier versions of AI to seem more human-like than ever. But what exactly is it, and how does it work? And will generative AI tools like ChatGPT become the new normal? Depending on who you ask, the digital future is either full of promise or positively dystopian. But the truth likely lies somewhere in the middle. And it's a field that will continue to be shaped by technologists, policymakers, and us, the end users, for years to come. In the next half hour, we'll explore the stories and ideas around artificial intelligence and what it means for our day-to-day lives. Here in New York City, home to the largest school district in the US, administrators initially banned the use of ChatGPT, an AI chatbot, due to fears of student cheating. Several months later, that ban was lifted. Matt Dibble takes a look at how there are no easy answers when it comes to the use of AI in the classroom.
Since its release in 2022, an artificial intelligence-powered writing tool called ChatGPT has won instant acclaim, but has also raised concerns, especially on school campuses. High school student Galvin Fickus demonstrated how entering a short command can generate a summary of Jane Eyre, a book she was assigned to read.
I think I did a pretty good job, honestly.
Some teachers, like Lupalette Taylor, are concerned the freely available tool could be used by students to do their homework for them and undermine learning.
The critical thinking that we all need as human beings, and the creativity, and also the benefit of having done something yourself and saying, I did that.
Across the U.S., school systems are choosing to restrict access to ChatGPT on their computers and networks. Developed by San Francisco-based OpenAI, ChatGPT is trained on a vast amount of language data from the internet. When prompted, the AI generates a response using the most likely sequence of words, creating original text that mimics human thought.
There's no what we call a source document, right, or a smoking gun to look to say, yes, this looks like it was lifted from that.
Annie Cecchitelli is Chief Product Officer for Turnitin, an academic integrity service used by educators in 140 countries. Turnitin's anti-plagiarism software checks the authenticity of a student paper by scanning the internet for possible matches. But when AI writes text, each line is novel and unique, making it hard to detect cheating. There is, however, one distinguishing feature of AI writing.
They tend to write in a very, very average way. Humans all have idiosyncrasies. We all deviate from average one way or another. So we're able to build detectors that look for cases where an entire document or an entire passage is uncannily average.
Turnitin's ChatGPT detector is due out later this year. Wang says keeping up with AI tools will be an ongoing challenge that will transform education.
A lot of things that we hold as norms and a status quo are going to have to shift.
AI may become acceptable for some uses in the classroom, just as calculators eventually did. Teacher Steve Wright was impressed when his student used ChatGPT to create a study guide for her calculus class.
You know, if ChatGPT can make us like throw up our hands and say, like, no longer can I ask a student to regurgitate a process, but now I'm going to have to actually dig in and watch them think to know if they're learning, that's fantastic.
In schools and elsewhere, it seems clear that AI will have a role in writing the future. Matt Dibble for VOA News, Oakland, California.
Education isn't the only field grappling with the implications of artificial intelligence. As reporter Dina Mitchell explores in the next segment, the latest AI is moving into the production studio, encroaching on the territory of musical artists.
I'm scared. This ain't Drake.
From the lyrics to the beat to the voices. A song posted by anonymous TikToker Ghostwriter977 sounded just like megastar musicians Drake and The Weeknd. Heart on My Sleeve, made with artificial intelligence, impressed fans, but had some in the music industry crying foul, and experts say it's not that hard to do.
Once a computer has a sort of understanding of the patterns that underlie voice in general, you don't need necessarily a lot of data from The Weeknd to generate, sounds that sound like him.
Universal Music Group, which represents both artists, released a statement emphasizing the need to protect artist music. Many platforms removed the song. Experts say experiments like this with AI are just the beginning.
The toothpaste is not going back in the tube. We have to learn how to best live with it.
Wang teaches a class on music and AI. He is concerned at the speed in which AI is developing.
What's at stake is how we communicate, how we work, how we govern. What's at stake is how we make art.
Fiebring says the music industry will have to decide how to fight or use AI.
Do they decide that it's the best way to make money is to start churning out AI songs that don't have much human involvement so they can pocket the sales of those and not pay artists?
Since the release of Heart on My Sleeve, the musician Grimes launched an AI voice software, allowing others to create music with her voice, as long as they split the royalties 50%. Dina Mitchell for VOA News.
Individual artists may choose to embrace or shun artificial intelligence as part of their creative process, but what role should companies play in the responsible development of these technologies? Julie Tabo takes a look at what the Biden administration is asking for from big tech.
Companies have an obligation to make sure their technology is safe before releasing it to the public.
Tech giants Amazon, Google, Meta, and Microsoft are among a group of 7 companies who promised to meet AI safeguards brokered by the White House.
These commitments, which the companies will implement immediately, underscore 3 fundamental principles: safety, security, and trust.
Some of the promised commitments are quite practical, says David Broniatowski, an associate professor in the School of Engineering and Applied Science at the George Washington University.
For example, the implementation of watermarking technologies for generative large language models is very implementable. Watermarking is a sign or an indicator, in the same way that fact-checking may help people to make sense of news that they see online, or credibility ratings may help people to understand what URLs they're looking at, whether it's coming from a good source or a source that's maybe less credible.
The four tech giants, along with ChatGPT maker OpenAI and startups Anthropic and Inflection, have committed to security testing carried out in part by independent experts to guard against major risks, such as in biosecurity and cybersecurity, the White House said. Big tech and smaller players will have to balance risk and innovation.
We cannot leave the development of artificial intelligence solely to private sector actors.
Anthropic's co-founder Jack Clark spoke at a recent UN Security Council meeting.
The governments of the world must come together, develop state capacity, and make the development of powerful AI systems a shared endeavor across all parts of society, rather than one dictated solely by a small number of firms competing with one another in the marketplace.
As the White House commits to advancing responsible AI technology in the U.S., the administration says it will also collaborate with its international partners on a common framework to govern the development and use of AI. Julie Tabo, VOA News.
The inherent risks posed by AI are considerable, with many still to be determined. What's clear is that guidelines are needed to govern the use of AI. But with simultaneous technologies being developed at a breakneck pace, where do policymakers even begin? I recently spoke with Suresh Venkata-Subramanian. He's a data and computer science professor at Brown University, and he's worked at the federal level to help draft a blueprint for an AI Bill of Rights. Suresh, tell us about the blueprint for an AI Bill of Rights and how it came about.
So the blueprint for an AI Bill of Rights is a collection of 5 principles to guide the design and development of automated systems so as to protect the American public, our civil rights, our civil liberties, our opportunities for advancement, and access to critical services that are provided to us by the government and other entities. So what we need are guardrails and protections.
And what are some of these guardrails, the key tenets of this blueprint?
So these systems should, number one, they should be safe. They shouldn't harm us, and effective. They should work as claimed. And this might come as a surprise, but a lot of times technology is deployed in a kind of let's try it and see what happens attitude, rather than let's make sure it works before we put it out there. Number two, we want systems that are unbiased. They should not discriminate against groups based on characteristics that are either protected under law or are irrelevant to the task at hand. These systems should be prudent with our data. They should use our data sparingly. They should use it only for the task at hand, and they shouldn't be outselling our data to other vendors for who knows what purposes. Number four is that these systems should be transparent and explainable. We should know if automation is being used to make decisions about us, and based on what criteria such systems are coming to the conclusions. And finally, these systems should come with human consideration and fallback. And there should be ways we can get recourse from people when these systems fail.
So on paper, it seems pretty common sense principles to adhere to. The language seems broad enough, though they could be interpreted in a variety of ways to varying degrees. So how can we ensure accountability here?
So along with the blueprint, the document, which is much longer, has what we call a technical companion that sort of gives much more specific details on how to ensure safety, effectiveness. So for example, if we talk about making sure that algorithms do not discriminate, there's a number of things you can do. You look at your data, you look at disparities in your data, you see what kind of data you've collected from different people, you understand whether there might be hidden disparities, and you do all that kind of testing. Now, what this looks like for a medical diagnostic test will look very different to what it looks like, say, for giving someone a loan. But doing that test is the common element between these.
How confident are you that these guidelines, that companies will actually adhere to them?
We need new laws, for sure. We need the willingness and the ability to enforce existing laws on discrimination, on transparency.
It's one of the few issues, tech regulation, I think, that garners bipartisan support, which is a rare thing in DC. But yes, at the same time, we've seen past failures to really enact any meaningful change. I mean, I think about social media and the proliferation of online misinformation and disinformation, and social media companies' failures to really get a handle on that. So can something as widespread and far-reaching as AI actually be regulated?
So I think for AI, it's not as if we don't have solutions. We actually know what we need to do. And what we're waiting for is for Congress, the executive branch, the regulators, the legislators at states to just go ahead and do it. But we know a lot about what is likely to work well for AI. Just basic transparency guidelines, reporting, pre-deployment testing, testing for disparities. And the reason I know that'll work is because when journalists and civil society advocates have exposed problems with algorithms, it turns out that they used the same methodologies, the same assessment auditing methodologies that could have been used ahead of time before the system was deployed. And the people deploying would have discovered these problems before they deployed it.
What do you see looking ahead as next steps, Suresh?
We've already seen some other small bits of legislation proposed. For example, legislation that would have a chief AI officer in every department and agency within the United States government and so on. We're seeing a lot of states put out AI legislation proposals. Some of them are even passed. I think there's a tendency to look at the one silver bullet that will always solve these problems. I'm actually more encouraged by the fact that there's so many different activities happening, because it makes me confident that some of these will stick and that will slowly over time, going back to the point about culture, change our attitudes and culture around how we expect AI systems to be deployed.
In the wrong hands, AI has the potential not only to harm individuals, but to destabilize government institutions. The upcoming U.S. presidential election has some worried about the problematic rise of online myths and disinformation. This time, Dina Mitchell examines how political deepfake videos are further fueled by generative AI.
Pope Francis did not really wear this designer Balenciaga coat, and former President Donald Trump was not photographed running from the police. These fake images were created with software using generative artificial intelligence. Deepfakes are already part of the 2024 U.S. presidential campaign, with this video from Trump opponents showing him hugging former White House chief medical advisor Dr. Anthony Fauci, with whom he was often at odds during the COVID-19 pandemic.
And widely published.
The misinformation debunking show Verify determined that 3 of the images are fake.
If you look more closely at the pictures, you can see more evidence they're AI generated. This one shows the 2 men standing in front of the White House decal in the press briefing room. But the decal, instead of saying White House, it says MeFap.
Deepfakes in political advertising alarm the nonprofit consumer advocacy organization Public Citizen, where Lisa Gilbert is executive vice president.
One of the things that artificial intelligence is able to do, particularly generative AI, is create easily deep fakes. So, video or audio that looks incredibly real, impossible to discern with the naked eye from a real video.
Public Citizen asked the U.S. Federal Election Commission to make rules for campaign ads that use computer-generated images. But the commission said that was not within its jurisdiction. There is little legal infrastructure for policing deepfakes, says Cornell Law Professor of Digital and Information Law, James Grimmelman.
And the Supreme Court has actually also made it pretty clear that it's quite difficult for them to regulate anything except the most egregiously false and harmful speech.
He expects the use of deepfakes in political campaigns will grow.
And it'll be very hard to trace the specifics of who created them.
There is currently legislation in Congress that would require political advertisements to state if generative AI was used. Dina Mitchell for VOA News.
As we've seen, generative AI can produce synthetic images and videos that are hard to distinguish from the real thing. Content that can make its way to bigger and bigger screens, like the ones here in Times Square. But if generative AI creates new work from pre-existing work, who owns that content and can claim rights to it? Amidst an ongoing strike in Hollywood, writers and actors are now having to contend with the AI versions of themselves in their work, as Janet Lowe reports from Los Angeles.
A controversial issue in the ongoing strike between Hollywood studios and Screen Actors Guilds is artificial intelligence, or AI, the use of which has grown exponentially in TV and movie production over the past decade.
The idea that somebody could take that ownership of yourself away from you, that's just very frightening.
Had actually forced people to go in those rooms and get scanned, or else you don't get paid for the day.
Now AI can actually do art, and that basically, if it doesn't frighten you, it should.
Bargaining for TV and movie studios, the Alliance of Motion Picture and Television Producers, or AMPTP, says it agreed to fair compensation when a digital replica is made of a performer. But the Screen Actors Guild, or SAG-AFTRA, says AMPTP is offering background performers pay for 1 day of work in exchange for the rights to their digital likeness for the rest of eternity with no compensation. AMPTP denies that allegation, saying the claim that the digital replicas of background performers may be used in perpetuity with no consent or compensation is false. At the recent Comic-Con convention in San Diego, AI was a major topic of discussion. Tim Friedlander, the president of the National Association of Voice Actors, or NAVA, said because AI can easily replicate human voices, its members have been affected earlier than other industries.
One actor found their voice taken and used in a promo that they never did, and another one worked for a company for 3 years, and for the 4th year, the company did not rehire them because they said, we have 3 years of your voice, we're just going to create an AI synthetic voice.
American voice actress Cissy Jones says the most scary scenario for her if her voice was digitized and programmed to say things that she doesn't agree with.
When it can be inflammatory content, whether it's racist, homophobic, NSFW, pornographic, right? Things that I would never say.
Duncan Crabtree Ireland, National Executive Director of SAG-AFTRA, which is leading strike negotiations with AMPTP, worries that actors could unknowingly give studios consent to use their images or voices.
This idea that you can just bury a sentence somewhere in a huge contract that says, I give you the rights to use my digital replica in perpetuity throughout the universe in any technology for any purpose, that's not good enough, especially when you are creating something new using that person's identity.
SAG-AFTRA negotiator and actor Zeke Elton says there should be laws that ensure performers give consent and are compensated.
So what it would ask for is that any content that comes out of an AI machine that is not a human person be marked as such. It's the very first step, so that when we're looking at advertising or when we're looking at art, we realize, is this a machine doing it or is this real human art?
Genia Dulo for VOA News, San Diego.
Not all AI is bad. As reporter Maxime Moskokov discovers, in some cases, the digital likenesses of people allow them and their memories to live on, even after they passed.
Using artificial intelligence to allow people to stay in touch with a loved one that passed away is being offered by a few startup companies. The so-called resurrection relies on creating chatbots or virtual doubles based on a deceased person's social data, images, voice and text messages, emails, etc. Michael Young works for a company called Deep Brain AI that creates the AI doubles.
So Maxim, let's say I want to create of you. Then we go to studio and we film you, and you read 300 to 500 sentences in front of the camera, and then we have that original video sources, and we do 1 month of machine learning. After 1 month of machine learning, we just create of your AI avatar, your digital twin of your avatar gonna talk.
Here is founder and CEO of a company called Storyfile, Steven Smith, sharing some biographic details. In reality, it's not Smith, but his avatar. The real Smith says his company allows anyone to tell their life story.
Think of it like a living photograph album that, we've all done this for, since the camera existed. What we're doing is using AI to support the person who, as an ancestor, passes down their memories as they would do in any other form.
Associate Professor of Religion at Baylor University, Candy Ken, believes AI could serve as a good therapeutic tool that can help grieving people.
Let's say you had a fight with your mom before she died, and so you are encouraged by your therapist to write a letter to your mom about the things you wish you had said instead, and the response you might have received from your mother in that situation.
But the idea of digital resurrection is a complicated concept, both legally and ethically, says Irina Reiku, director of the Internet Ethics Program at Santa Clara University.
in a way, this sense that we can somehow keep a tech version of loved ones alive strikes me as a weird kind of relative of embalming, that instead of embalming somebody's body and trying to keep them with us, we are trying to embalm their minds.
As with most new technologies, there is a great potential here and a great potential for abuse. Maxim Moskolkov for VOA News, Washington.
That's all for now. Stay up to date with all the news at voanews.com. Follow us on Instagram and Facebook at VOA News. You can find me on X at TinaTrinNYC and catch up on past episodes on our free streaming service, VOA+. For all of those behind the scenes who brought you today's show, I'm Tina Trin. We'll see you next week on The Inside Story.
And that's it for today. We hope you all came out a tad more informed, just like I did. Please join us tomorrow for another half hour, an up-close look on one more news story. And don't forget to work hard, dream big, give thanks, and be kind, and catch the news right here on PTV. This is Sharm Zespina for Stories from the Grid.